Tom was a man who loved peace more than anything else. He had lived many years in a busy town where cars made noise every morning, horns filled the air, and people rushed through the streets without even looking at one another. He always dreamed of a place where he could sit quietly, hear the sound of water moving slowly, and watch the sun shining gently on the surface of calm waves. That dream came true when he finally bought a small piece of land outside the town. On that land stood tall green trees, fresh grass, and most important of all, a clear, beautiful lake. The lake was not very big, but it was wide enough to look like a mirror when the wind was still. Fish swam inside it, and birds often stopped to drink from the edges. Tom had saved money for many years just to own this little paradise. He worked extra hours, skipped many things he wished to buy, and finally gathered enough to purchase it. When the day came that the papers were signed and the land became his, Tom felt like the happiest man in the world. The lake gave him a sense of pride. He built a small wooden dock at one corner, where he could sit with a fishing rod in hand. Sometimes he caught fish, but often he just sat there without any need to catch anything. For him, the lake was not about fishing. It was about silence, about being away from noise, and about breathing deeply without worrying about the world outside. Every morning before work, Tom walked near the lake. He enjoyed the cool air that came from the water, the sound of frogs, and the sight of sunlight breaking across the trees. In the evenings, after finishing his day, he sat again on the dock with a simple cup of tea. He often thought to himself that the lake was like a friend who listened without asking questions. When Tom purchased the land, he made sure that all the documents were correct. He asked the lawyer to check if the Homeowners Association, often called the HOA, had any rights over the lake. The lawyer assured him that the lake was fully private. The HOA rules did not apply to it. Tom paid for his property in full, and no one could claim it belonged to anyone else. This made Tom even more confident because he did not want others telling him how to use his own land. For months, life went smoothly. The neighbors were friendly, but not too close. Tom liked it that way. He greeted people when he saw them, helped if someone needed a small favor, but mostly kept to himself. Everyone seemed to accept that the lake was his private space, and nobody questioned it. That peace lasted until one new neighbor arrived. The new neighbor was a woman named Karen. She moved into the house across the street from Tom's property. At first, Tom thought nothing of it. People came and went all the time. He waved politely when Karen first drove up with her moving truck, but she did not wave back. Instead, she stood on her porch looking around with sharp eyes as if she was already judging everything she saw. Tom noticed it but ignored it, telling himself that maybe she was just tired from moving. In the following days, Tom saw Karen walking around the neighborhood often. She talked to different people, asked many questions, and seemed eager to be involved in everything. Soon, Tom learned from another neighbor that Karen had joined the HOA board almost immediately after moving in. That surprised Tom, because most people took time to settle before becoming active in neighborhood matters. But Karen seemed to enjoy having a voice, giving opinions, and making rules. One evening, Tom was sitting on his dock watching the water when he noticed Karen across the street. She was staring directly at the lake. Her eyes followed the edge of the water, the tall grass around it, and even the dock where Tom sat. It was not the look of someone who admired beauty. It was the look of someone who wanted control. Tom felt a small chill, not from the air, but from her stare. A week later, Tom attended an HOA meeting just to stay informed about neighborhood updates. He usually sat quietly in the back, listening without much interest. That evening, however, the meeting turned unusual. Karen raised her hand and stood up proudly. She spoke in a voice that carried across the whole room. "This neighborhood has a lake," she said firmly. "It is unfair that the rest of us do not have access to it. We all pay HOA fees. We deserve to enjoy it too." Murmurs spread across the room. Some neighbors looked surprised. Others looked confused. Everyone knew the lake was Tom's private property. Tom, who never liked conflict, slowly raised his hand. "Excuse me," he said calmly, "but the lake is not part of HOA land. I bought it myself." "It is private property." Karen turned toward him, her eyes narrowing. "It may be private on paper, but it is inside our neighborhood. You cannot keep it only for yourself. The community deserves to use it. We could build benches there, maybe even a walkway. It would be a perfect place for all of us." Tom shook his head gently. "I understand your thought, but the lake is mine. I take care of it. I maintain it. It is not open for public use. Karen crossed her arms and frowned. You're being selfish. You should think about the good of the community, not only yourself. Tom did not want to argue in front of everyone. He simply said, I am only following what is written in the property papers. Then he sat down quietly. The meeting moved on to other topics, but Karen's eyes stayed fixed on Tom. He could feel her anger even though she did not speak again. From that night, Tom knew trouble was coming. The next few days confirmed his worry. Karen began walking near his fence more often. She stood on the street, staring at the lake, sometimes even pointing at it while talking to other neighbors. Once Tom heard her telling someone, it's not right for him to keep it to himself. We'll change that soon. Tom stayed calm on the outside, but inside he felt unsettled. He had worked so hard to buy this lake. It was not just water to him. It was his peace, his dream, his hard-earned reward. The thought of someone trying to take it away made him uneasy. Still, Tom told himself that the law was clear. His property was protected. The HOA had no power over it. Karen could complain all she wanted, but she could not legally do anything. Tom thought that maybe she would get bored after a while and stop. He had no idea how far she was willing to go. That evening, as Tom sat again on his dock sipping tea, the sun set behind the trees. The lake glowed with orange light and the air was calm. Tom tried to focus on the beauty in front of him, but in his mind, Karen's words from the meeting kept echoing. You're being selfish. The community deserves it. The lake reflected the fading sky, and Tom whispered to himself, this is mine. I will not give it up. He had no clue that this was just the beginning of a long conflict, one that would test his patience, his strength, and his right to enjoy the peace he had worked so hard to find. The days after the HOA meeting were not quiet for Tom. Life around the lake had always been peaceful, but now he could feel a new kind of tension hanging in the air. Every time he stepped outside, he noticed Karen in one way or another. She stood in her yard, glancing toward the lake. She walked with other neighbors, talking in whispers and pointing at the water. She behaved as if the lake was already under discussion, and she was leading some hidden plan. Tom did not like to involve himself in gossip, but he could not ignore the way she acted. He had lived in that neighborhood long enough to understand that some people enjoyed control, and Karen was clearly one of them. The strange part was how quickly she had taken over. She had not even been there for 2 months, and already she behaved as though the whole community was hers to manage. One morning, as Tom was watering the flowers by his porch, Karen walked directly across the street and stopped near his fence. Her voice was polite at first, but her eyes showed a harder truth. Good morning, Tom, she said. I hope you are well. I wanted to talk to you about the lake again. Tom placed the watering can down and turned toward her. Good morning, Karen. I think we already discussed this in the meeting. The lake is private. I am not opening it to the public. Karen gave a thin smile, the kind that hides irritation. Yes, I remember your words. But you see, this is about fairness. The neighbors believe it is unfair that one man controls such a beautiful space. Imagine children playing there, families walking by the water, maybe even small community events. Why should you keep it only for yourself? Tom's voice remained calm. Because I bought it with my money. I take care of it with my time. It belongs to me. The community has its own park and playground. That lake is not part of HOA land. Karen's smile disappeared. Her arms crossed tightly. You sound selfish. People do not like selfishness. I am on the HOA board, and I will bring this matter forward again. You will see. Without waiting for a reply, she turned and walked away. Tom sighed and shook his head. He knew that no matter what he said, Karen would not stop. Later that week, Tom noticed more signs of her efforts. A group of neighbors gathered in front of Karen's house one evening. She spoke with animated hands, pointing toward the lake repeatedly. Some neighbors nodded, others looked uncertain, but Tom could see that she was trying to win them over. He did not want to be rude, but he also did not want to allow false ideas to spread, so he invited his closest neighbor, an older man named Robert, over for tea. Robert had lived in the neighborhood for many years and was known as a fair, honest person. Robert, Tom began, pouring tea into 2 cups. You know the truth about the lake. Do people really believe Karen when she says it belongs to the HOA? Robert took a sip of tea and shook his head slowly. Some might be confused, but most know the truth. The paperwork is clear. Still, you must understand, Tom. Karen is not the kind of person who accepts no easily. She has a way of making noise until people listen. Even if she is wrong, she will keep pushing. Tom nodded. I figured as much. I just hope people do not start thinking I am the enemy. Robert leaned back in his chair. Those who know you will not think that. But you should prepare yourself. She will not stop with simple words. She will look for ways to pressure you. The warning turned out to be true. A few days later, Tom came home from work to find two other HOA board members standing near his fence with Karen. They were pointing at the lake, writing notes on clipboards and speaking as if they were planning something. Tom walked over. What is going on here? Karen looked at him with a proud expression. We are doing a survey. We are thinking of adding benches and maybe a small walkway near the water. It would make this place beautiful for everyone. Tom frowned. This is private land. You cannot plan anything here. You are trespassing. One of the board members looked nervous. Karen said we had permission to look around. We thought it was allowed. Tom shook his head firmly. You do not have permission. The lake belongs to me. If you want proof, I have the deed in my house. You cannot touch this land. Karen's face grew red. You are making a mistake. The HOA has more authority than you think. Tom stayed calm but firm. Authority ends at the boundary of my property. I pay for it, I maintain it, and no HOA funds are used here. Leave now. The two board members exchanged uneasy looks. They whispered to each other and began to walk away. Karen, however, did not move at first. She glared at Tom as if trying to break him with her stare. Finally, she spun on her heel and followed the others, muttering, You will regret this. That evening, Tom sat at his dock longer than usual. The lake was calm, but his thoughts were not. He replayed the scene again and again. Karen had crossed the line from demanding to planning without permission. It was not just annoying anymore. It was dangerous. He realized she truly believed she had power over his land, and she would not stop until she tried every possible way to take it. The next HOA meeting came, and Tom chose not to attend. He did not want another argument in public. But the day after, he heard from Robert that Karen had spent almost the entire meeting speaking about the lake. She called it community property, Robert explained. She said you were blocking progress and being unfair. Some people agreed, but others reminded her the lake was private. The meeting ended without a clear decision, but Karen will keep bringing it up. Tom felt a mix of frustration and determination. He knew the law was on his side, but he also knew how words could twist people's minds. If enough neighbors started believing Karen's version, he could face endless pressure. Over the next week, Tom kept a close eye on his property. He noticed Karen walking by more often, sometimes stopping with her phone raised as if taking pictures. Once, she even stood with a tape measure, stretching it across the street and making notes. Tom did not confront her, but the sight filled him with unease. One Saturday morning, Tom was painting the fence when Karen came again. This time, she was not alone. She brought 3 other neighbors with her. Tom, she said loudly, we have decided that the lake will serve the community. You cannot keep it for yourself. We are giving you a chance to cooperate willingly. If you refuse, the HOA will take action. The 3 neighbors behind her looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot. Tom stood tall, holding his brush. His voice was calm, but his words were clear. You cannot take what is not yours. This land and this lake belong to me. If anyone tries to build, enter, or claim it, I will use the law to stop them. That is final. One of the neighbors whispered, Maybe we should not push this. Another nodded, but Karen raised her voice even louder. You will not win, Tom. The community is bigger than one man. Tom set down his brush and looked straight into her eyes. The law is bigger than false claims. Leave my property. The group finally turned and walked away. The 3 neighbors looked apologetic, but Karen's face was hard with anger. That night, Tom sat by the lake again. The moon shone brightly on the water, and the sound of crickets filled the air. He wanted to enjoy the peace, but inside he knew it was only temporary. Karen was not giving up. She had already shown she was willing to bend rules, twist words, and gather people against him. The fight for his lake had only begun. Tom had never thought that owning a lake would turn into a struggle. When he first bought the land, he imagined years of peace and quiet, evenings filled with the sound of frogs and the sight of soft ripples on the water. But now, instead of peace, his days carried a strange weight. It was the weight of being watched, challenged, and pressured. Karen had made it clear she would not let the matter rest. She had already tried meetings, surveys, and even group confrontations. None of them had worked, yet her spirit remained unshaken. She was like a storm that refused to pass. Tom tried to continue his normal life. Each morning, he still walked near the water, touching the cool surface with his hand. Each evening, he still sat on the dock with his cup of tea. He reminded himself that the lake was his and nothing could change that truth. But deep inside, he knew the battle was moving to another level. The signs appeared quickly. One afternoon, Tom was walking back from the local store when he saw a large printed paper taped to the notice board at the entrance of the neighborhood. In bold letters, it read, "Community meeting, proposal to open lake access for all residents." Tom stopped in his tracks. He read the paper again to be sure. There was no mistake. Karen had managed to put the matter into official discussion for the next meeting. Several neighbors were already gathered near the board, reading the notice. Some looked excited while others looked doubtful. Tom overheard one woman say, "It would be so nice to take my kids there." Another replied, "But is it really allowed? I thought it was private." Tom walked away quietly, but his mind was troubled. He knew Karen was determined to use the HOA board to push the idea again. He also knew that once something entered into official meetings, it could gain more attention and more confusion. That evening, Tom invited Robert again. They sat on the porch with tea as the sun dipped behind the trees. "Did you see the notice?" Tom asked. Robert nodded slowly. "I saw it this morning. Karen is pushing harder now. But remember, even if the HOA votes, they have no legal claim on your land. A vote cannot erase a property deed." Tom sighed. "I know that. But what worries me is the people. If they believe her, they will look at me as the enemy of the community. I don't want fights with neighbors." Robert patted his shoulder. "Stay calm, Tom. The truth is on your side. And when the time comes, show the proof again." Most people respect facts more than noise. The meeting arrived 2 days later. The hall was full more than usual. People wanted to hear about the lake. Tom sat quietly at the back, but his heart beat faster as Karen stood proudly at the front. She held a folder in her hands filled with papers. "My fellow neighbors," she began, "this community has many blessings, but one blessing has been locked away from us. The lake that lies in our neighborhood has been denied to us for too long. We deserve access. It is unfair for one man to control what belongs to the spirit of this community." Applause filled the room. Not everyone clapped, but enough did to make Karen smile wider. She continued, "Imagine our children playing by the water, our families walking along the shore, community gatherings by the dock. This vision is possible if we act together. We can make it happen." Then she looked directly at Tom. "One man cannot stop progress." Tom stood slowly. He held the property deed in his hand. His voice was calm but strong. "This lake is private property. It is mine by law. I purchased it, I care for it, and I protect it. It is not under HOA authority." No vote can change that. The room grew quiet. People shifted in their seats. Some looked at Karen, others at Tom. Karen lifted her chin. You hear his words. He cares only about himself. He hides behind papers while the rest of us dream of a better neighborhood. Do you want one man to hold all of us back? A neighbor stood up. It was an elderly woman named Grace. She spoke gently. Karen, I understand your wish, but we must be fair. The lake is his. We cannot take what is not ours. That would not be right, another man stood. Yes, but what if he let us use it sometimes? Maybe with rules. We just want to enjoy it too. Tom shook his head. I cannot allow that. It is not safe. If someone gets hurt, I will be blamed. It is not just about sharing. It is about responsibility. Please respect my rights. The board discussed for an hour, but in the end they announced they could not force Tom. The law was clear. The lake remained private. Karen left the hall with her face tight and her steps quick. She did not speak to anyone. But Tom could see in her eyes before she left she was not finished. The next morning, Tom noticed something strange. Near his fence, the grass was trampled as if someone had walked there at night. He also found a small wooden stick stuck into the ground with a red ribbon tied around it. It looked like a marker. His chest tightened. Was someone trying to mark boundaries? Was Karen planning something again? Later that day, he caught sight of Karen with her phone in hand, taking photos of the lake from across the street. When she noticed Tom watching, she smiled coldly and waved before walking away. By the end of the week, 3 more markers appeared along the edge of his property. Tom pulled them out each time, but the message was clear. Karen was not backing down. She was preparing for another move. Robert came by again when Tom told him about the markers. Robert frowned deeply. She is trying to build a case. Maybe she wants to claim the lake should be part of HOA land. Be careful, Tom. She may even call outside officials to check. Tom nodded. If she does, I will show the truth again. But it feels like she is testing how far she can go. That evening, Tom sat on his dock, the lake shining under the moon. The water was calm, but his heart was not. He loved the beauty around him, but now it felt under threat. It was no longer just about peace. It was about standing firm. The escalation had begun, and Tom knew it would not end easily. Karen was ready to fight harder, and soon he would have to defend not just his lake, but his very right to live in peace. The weeks after the HOA meeting were uneasy for Tom. He had won that small battle by showing the property deed, but he knew the war was not over. Karen had walked out of the meeting in silence, but her silence was not peace. It was a warning. Tom noticed the little signs. He would see Karen standing across the street, staring at the lake with her arms folded. Sometimes she was with other neighbors talking in hushed voices while pointing at his property. Other times she walked alone with her phone, taking pictures of the water, the dock, and even his fence. One morning, Tom stepped outside to find another red ribbon tied to a stick, stuck into the ground near the edge of the lake. It was not there the night before. He pulled it out, but as he held it in his hand, he felt his patience slowly wearing down. This was more than curiosity. This was intrusion. He spoke with Robert about it that evening. She will not stop, Tom said, shaking his head. Every day she tries something new. Markers, pictures, meetings. What's next? Robert sighed. Tom, people like her do not give up. They push until someone stronger stops them. You have the law on your side, but be ready. She may try to bring outsiders into this fight. Robert's words came true faster than Tom expected. One quiet afternoon, Tom was repairing a loose board on his dock when he heard the sound of sirens in the distance. At first he thought it was unrelated, but then the noise grew louder, and soon a police car turned into his driveway. Tom stood up confused. He wiped his hands on his jeans and walked toward the front of his house. The car door opened and a uniformed officer stepped out. Right behind him was Karen, waving her arms as if she were leading the officer toward some great discovery. "Officer, here he is," Karen called out. "This is the man I told you about. He is blocking community property and refusing access to the lake." The officer held up his hand to calm her and turned to Tom. "Sir, we received a complaint about restricted access to neighborhood property. Can you explain what's going on?" Tom felt his heart beat harder, but he kept his voice steady. "Officer, the lake is private property. It is mine. I bought it with this land. It does not belong to the HOA or the community." Karen stepped forward quickly. "That is not true. Look around. The lake is inside the neighborhood. It is unfair for one man to own it. We all live here and we all pay HOA fees. He is keeping it from us." The officer raised his hand again. "Ma'am, let him speak." Tom nodded and walked to his porch. He returned with a folder in his hands. "This is the deed. It clearly states that the lake is part of my property. The HOA has no rights over it." The officer took the papers and studied them carefully. Karen tried to peek over his shoulder, but he shifted slightly so she could not. After a long moment, he looked up. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "the papers are clear. This lake belongs to him. It is private property. The HOA has no authority here." Karen's face turned pale. But that is not fair. How can one person keep something so beautiful from everyone else?" "The community deserves this space," the officer shook his head. "Fair or unfair is not the issue. The law is the issue. He owns this property. You cannot force him to share it. If you continue to harass him, you could face legal consequences." Tom stood silently, watching Karen's expression change from anger to shock. For once, she had no clever reply. The officer handed the deed back to Tom. "Sir, thank you for showing this. Everything is in order. If she or anyone else bothers you again, keep records. Take photos if they trespass. Call us if it becomes a problem." "I will," Tom said calmly. The officer nodded and returned to his car. Karen remained standing in the driveway for a moment, her lips pressed tightly together. Then, without a word, she turned and walked quickly back across the street. For the first time in weeks, Tom felt relief. He sat on his porch, holding the deed in his hands, breathing deeply. The law had spoken. The truth had been seen. But deep down, he wondered if Karen would accept defeat, or if this was only another pause before her next attempt. The neighborhood buzzed with whispers that evening. Some had seen the police car and asked questions. Stories spread quickly. Some said Tom had been proven right. Others said Karen had embarrassed herself. A few believed she had simply made a mistake. Robert came by later with a small smile. "I heard what happened. Seems the law is on your side, as we knew, but I doubt this will end Karen's efforts. She does not seem like the type to accept being wrong." Tom nodded. "I thought the same. But at least now everyone knows the truth. Even she cannot argue against the officer's words." Robert placed a hand on his shoulder. "Stay strong. Your peace is worth protecting." That night, Tom returned to his dock. The lake reflected the stars and the air was calm. For the first time in many days, he felt lighter. The sound of water against the wood seemed like a song of victory. Yet even in that calm, Tom's mind whispered a warning. Karen was silent now, but silence from her did not mean surrender. It meant she was thinking, planning, waiting. And Tom knew the fight for his lake was not over. After the police visit, the neighborhood was not the same. The sight of the patrol car in Tom's driveway had left an impression on everyone. People whispered about it during morning walks, at the mailboxes, and in casual talks on their porches. Some said Tom had been right all along. Others said Karen had gone too far. For Tom, the visit had been both a relief and a burden. Relief because the officer had confirmed the truth, that the lake was his and no one could take it. A burden because he knew Karen was not the kind of person who accepted defeat quietly. She had been embarrassed, and people who thrived on control often responded to embarrassment with more anger. Still, Tom tried to live normally. He continued his walks by the water, his evenings on the dock, and his quiet mornings watching the sunrise. The lake, his lake, reminded him why he had fought so hard. It was not about pride. It was about peace. It was about the reward of years of work and the dream he had built with patience. At first, Karen was unusually quiet. For several days she did not stand near the lake, did not bring neighbors to talk, and did not attend casual gatherings as she used to. People thought perhaps she had finally given up. Tom himself wondered if maybe, after the officer's firm words, she had accepted the truth. But the calm was short. One afternoon, Tom found a folded paper in his mailbox. It had no stamp, no address, and no name on it. He opened it and read a message typed in bold letters. "You may have the law, but you do not have the community." "You cannot win against everyone," Tom sighed deeply. The words carried the same spirit he had seen in Karen's eyes. She had not given up. She had only changed her strategy. That evening, Robert came to visit. Tom showed him the paper. Robert frowned and shook his head. "She is trying to scare you. She wants you to feel alone. But you are not alone, Tom. Many of us respect you and know the truth. She may talk, but we know her nature now." Tom nodded. "I am not afraid of her words. I just do not want this to go on forever. I want peace." Robert looked out at the lake and spoke softly. "Peace often requires standing firm. You have done that. People see it. Give it time. The truth will outlast her noise." The following week, the HOA board called another meeting. Tom thought carefully about attending. He did not want more arguments, but he also did not want Karen to twist the story without his presence. In the end, he decided to go. The hall was not as crowded as before, but enough people were there to show interest. Karen was present too, sitting in the front row with her usual proud posture. When the meeting began, she wasted no time. "I want to remind everyone," she said loudly, "that this neighborhood should be a place of sharing and fairness. Yet one man still blocks access to the lake. Even if the law says it is his, is that truly right? Should we live under such selfishness?" Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Others shook their heads. Tom stood up slowly. His voice was calm but strong enough for everyone to hear. "The lake is mine by law, and that is not going to change. But I am not your enemy. I am your neighbor. I greet you, I help when I can, and I respect your space. All I ask is the same respect for mine. This lake is not just water to me. It is years of work, years of saving, years of dreaming. I bought it, I take care of it, and I cherish it. To call that selfish is unfair. To demand what does not belong to you is selfish." The room grew quiet. People looked at Tom with thoughtful eyes. Grace, the elderly woman who had defended him before, stood up once again. "Tom is right," she said. "The lake is his. To force him to share it would not be community spirit. It would be taking what is not ours. We have a park, we have paths, we have space. Let the man have his peace. A man in the back raised his hand. I agree. If we keep pushing, it will only divide us more. We should focus on what we do have, not on what we do not. The board members exchanged looks. One of them finally spoke. We cannot take legal steps against Tom. The officer has confirmed the property rights. We should put this matter to rest. Karen's face turned red. She stood abruptly, her voice sharp. You are all blind. He has tricked you. He hides behind papers while keeping the best place for himself. This is not over. She stormed out of the hall, leaving everyone in silence. Tom sat back down, his heart steady. For the first time, he felt the neighbors truly understood. They had heard his side, and many had spoken in his favor. The tide was turning. In the days that followed, the atmosphere changed. Neighbors who once stayed silent now greeted Tom warmly. Some even apologized for doubting him. Children waved as they rode their bikes past his fence. The whispers of gossip slowly faded. Karen, however, grew more distant. She rarely came out of her house. She no longer stood near the lake, no longer gathered groups, no longer spoke at meetings. Her silence this time was different. It was not planning. It was defeat. One evening, Tom sat on his dock as the sun dipped low, painting the sky orange and pink. The lake shimmered with color and the air was cool. He thought back on everything that had happened. The meetings, the markers, the police, the letters. It had been a storm, but the storm had passed. Robert joined him on the dock, carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed one to Tom and sat beside him. It looks like peace is back, Robert said. Tom nodded. It feels that way. I did not want to fight, but I could not let go of what I worked for. Robert smiled. And you did not let go. You stood firm, and in the end, people respected that. Sometimes that is the only way to protect peace, by refusing to give in to unfairness. Tom sipped his tea and looked at the water. I only hope this is the end, Robert chuckled. For Karen, maybe not, but for the rest of us it is. She lost the community when she pushed too hard. People see her differently now. The 2 men sat quietly, listening to the gentle sounds of the lake. Fireflies danced above the grass and the sky grew darker with stars. Tom realized that the lake was more than just his property. It was a symbol of his journey, his patience, and his strength. It had been tested just as he had been tested, and both had endured. From that day forward, Tom's life returned to normal. He kept his dock, his morning walks, and his peaceful evenings. The neighbors respected his space, and the HOA never brought up the lake again. Karen remained in the neighborhood, but she kept to herself. She had lost her battle, and though she never admitted it, she accepted it through her silence. The lake remained private, as it was meant to be, and Tom, sitting quietly with his fishing rod or his cup of tea, knew he had defended more than water and land. He had defended his right to live in peace. In the end, peace was restored.